14 April 1471. In England, the Yorkists under Edward IV defeat the Lancastrians under the Earl of Warwick at the Battle of Barnet. The Earl is killed. Edward resumes the throne. 1775, the Society for the Relief of Free Negroes unlawfully held in bondage, the first abolition society in North America, is organized in Philadelphia by Benjamin Franklin and Benjamin Rush. 1865, U.S. President Abraham Lincoln is shot in Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth. Lincoln dies the following day. Spoiler alert. 1894, the first ever commercial motion picture house opens in New York City. It uses 10 kinetoscopes, devices for peep show viewing of films. 1912, the British passenger liner RMS Titanic hits an iceberg in the North Atlantic and begins to sink. Spoiler alert, she sinks.
Still say there was enough room on that door for Jack.
1945, the raising of Forsyth, the 4th Canadian Armored Division, in history's only documented instance of a Canadian war crime, deliberately destroys the German town of Forsyth on the orders of Major General Christopher Vokes. 1981, STS-1, the first operational Space Shuttle Columbia flight, is completed successfully. 15 April 1755, Samuel Johnson's A Dictionary of the English Language is first published in London. 1817, Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet and Laurent Clerc found the American School for the Deaf, which was then called the Connecticut Asylum for the Education and Instruction of Deaf and Dumb Persons, the first American school for deaf students in Hartford, Connecticut. 1922, U.S. Senator John B. Kendrick of Wyoming introduces a resolution calling for an investigation of a secret land deal, which leads to the discovery of the Teapot Dome scandal. 1947, Jackie Robinson debuts for the Brooklyn Dodgers, breaking baseball's color line. 1952, the very first flight of the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, which is still in active service today. 2019, the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris is seriously damaged by a large fire, and I believe they're just about finished rebuilding it. 16 April, 1457 BC, the Battle of Megiddo, the first battle to have been recorded in what is accepted in relatively reliable detail, is fought. 73 AD, Masada, a Jewish fortress, falls to the Romans after several months of siege, ending the First Jewish-Roman War. And yes, if you're wondering, that's the one where all the Jews jump off the cliff because they don't want to be taken alive by the Romans. 1746, the Battle of Culloden, the last ever pitched battle on English soil, is fought between the French-supported Jacobites and the British Hanoverian forces commanded by William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland in Scotland. 1943, Albert Hofmann accidentally discovers the hallucinogenic effects of the research drug LSD. He intentionally takes the drug 3 days later on April 19th. Think he might have liked it. 1945, World War II. The Red Army begins the final assault on German forces around Berlin with nearly 1 million troops fighting in the Battle of the Seelow Heights. 1961, in a nationally broadcast speech, in one of the greatest professional wrestling-style heel turns in world political history, Cuban leader Fidel Castro declares that he is a Marxist-Leninist and that Cuba is going to adopt communism. 17 April 1521, the trial of Martin Luther over his teachings begins during the assembly of the Diet of Worms. Initially intimidated, he asks for time to reflect before answering and is given a stay of 1 day. 1895, the Treaty of Shimonoseki between Japan and China is signed. This marks the end of the First Sino-Japanese War, and the defeated Qing Empire is forced to renounce its claims on Korea and to concede the southern portion of the Fengchan province, Taiwan, and the Pengchu to Japan. 1907, the Ellis Island Immigration Center processes 11,747 people, more than it does on any other day. And put that number in context with today's numbers of illegal entries, just, in one sector every day, and watch your mind explode. 1961, the Bay of Pigs. A group of Cuban exiles financed and trained by the CIA lands at the Bay of Pigs in Cuba with the aim of ousting Fidel Castro. And I think we all know how that one ended. 1970, the damaged Apollo 13 spacecraft returns to Earth safely. 1986, an alleged state of war lasting 335 years between the Netherlands and the Isles of Scilly declared peace, bringing an end to any hypothetical war that may have legally been considered to exist, and in which no shots were ever fired. We're glad they got that one sorted out. April 1506, the cornerstone of the current St. Peter's Basilica is laid. 1775, the British advancement by sea begins. Paul Revere and his other rider compatriots warn the countryside of the British troop movements. 1847, American victory at the Battle of Cerro Gordo opens the way for the invasion of Mexico. 1906, the 7.9 earthquake and fire destroy much of San Francisco, California, killing more than 3,000 people, making one of the worst natural disasters in American history. 1942, the Doolittle raid on Japan, Tokyo, Yokohama, Kobe, and Nagoya. They are duly bombed by our boys. That's an anniversary we should probably be talking about when I finish with this.
We should.
1943, Operation Vengeance. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto is killed when his aircraft is shot down by U.S. fighters over Bougainville Island. 1980, the town of Elmore City, Oklahoma. Kevin Bacon fans will enjoy this one, holds the first ever dance in the town's history. 19 April 1539, the Treaty of Frankfurt between Protestants and the Holy Roman Emperor is signed. 1770, Captain James Cook, still then holding the rank of lieutenant, first sights the eastern coast of what is now known as Australia. 1775, the American Revolutionary War begins with an American victory in Concord during the battles of Lexington and Concord. 1782, John Adams secures Dutch recognition of the United States as an independent government. The house, which he purchased in The Hague, becomes the very first American embassy. 1839, the Treaty of London establishes Belgium as a kingdom and guarantees its neutrality. 1861, the Baltimore riots. A pro-secessionist mob in Baltimore attacks United States Army troops marching through the city. 1927, Mae West, God bless her heart, is sentenced to 10 days in jail for obscenity for her play entitled Sex. 1943, Albert Hoffman deliberately doses himself with LSD this time, 3 days after having accidentally discovered its effects. On 16 April, an event commonly known and celebrated as Bicycle Day. 1956, actress Grace Kelly marries Prince Renier of Monaco. 1971, Charles Manson is sentenced to death, later commuted to life in prison for conspiracy in the Tate LaBianca murders. 20 April, 1653, Oliver Cromwell dissolves England's Rump Parliament. 1792, France declares war against the King of Hungary and Bohemia, thus beginning the French Revolutionary Wars. 1859, Daniel E. Sickles, a New York congressman. Yes, he is also the Dan Sickles who later becomes the Civil War general who went and visited his own amputated leg in a museum for 40 years. Is acquitted of the murder of Philip Barton Key on grounds of temporary insanity. The case marked the very first successful use of the temporary insanity legal defense. 1861, Robert E. Lee resigns his commission in the United States Army in order to command the forces of the state of Virginia. 1898, U.S. President William McKinley signs a joint resolution to Congress for declaration of war against Spain, beginning the Spanish-American War. 1918, Manfred von Richthofen, a.k.a. the Red Baron, shoots down his 79th and 80th victims, his final victories before his death the following day. 1945, on his 56th and final birthday, Mrs. Schickelgruber's little boy makes his last trip to the surface to award Iron Crosses to boy soldiers of the Hitler Youth. 1972, Apollo 16, commanded by John Young, piloted by Charlie Duke, lands on the moon. 2023, SpaceX's Starship rocket, the largest, most powerful rocket ever built by the hands of men, launches for the first time and explodes 4 minutes into flight. And that is all I have got.
Magnificent, brother.